My name's Karl. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Caleb. Was I the only one that noticed for the very first time how many words have the letter P in it in the traditions just now? I've been here 35 years and I did not know how many words had the letter P in it. Public, primary. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Love you a lot. And there's a rumor that Connie has 33 years today. I am grateful to be here. Lots of friends are here, and I've just been filled up so far by everybody that's been at this podium. And I got to tell you, I enjoy listening just as much as I love doing this. I feel useful when I'm doing this, but I got to tell you, this weekend sitting in that chair, I loved being there too. And there's a lot of things that I feel are really, really important in this world. There are things that I have a lot of passion for, that I spend a lot of time paying attention to, but there's nothing more important in my life than the very first sentence that I said when I got up here, and that's, my name's Karl, I'm an alcoholic. That is the most important thing in my life. Now, the reason I believe I'm an alcoholic is really very simple. The reason I believe I'm an alcoholic is because I've got a really bizarre relationship with alcohol. That's why I believe I'm an alcoholic. And this strange relationship that I have with alcohol takes on a few forms. The first part of this strange relationship that I have with alcohol happens when I drink it. Very strange thing happens when I drink booze. Our book calls it an allergic reaction. And the book says the symptom of this allergic reaction that I get when I drink alcohol is what they refer to as something called the phenomenon of craving. And the best way that I can describe this thing that the book calls the phenomenon of craving in my life is that it seems like whenever I drink booze, the more booze I drink, the thirstier I get. Happens with absolutely nothing else that I drink. An example of that is I've got this bottle of water, and over the next 50 minutes to 5 hours that I'm talking with you, I'll probably drink half of this. Before 6 p.m., I will be finishing this bottle of water. But I can absolutely guarantee you that once I finish that bottle of water, I am not going to go get a case of water and lock myself in a motel room. Right? There is no chance that I'll be texting Sheldon, dude, man, get me another case. I'll turn the pistol at my car over. I won't be peeking through the blinds. It's not going to happen. But if that was the only thing that made me alcoholic, this bizarre physical reaction that I get, if that was the sum total of my relationship to alcohol, this unquenchable thirst that happens once I start drinking, if that was it, well then, Just Say No would have wiped out alcoholism, right? Early 80s, Nancy Reagan came out and said, just say no. If that would have worked, I would have, and I imagine you would have gone, ha, ha, no. And just gone on and lived a happy, successful life, just saying no. But I've got this other strange part of my relationship with alcohol, and what's really strange about this component of my relationship with alcohol is that this happens when I'm not drinking. Our book calls this the mental obsession. They also refer to it as the strange mental blank spot, or the thought process that precedes the first drink. And the best way that I can describe this thing that the book calls this mental obsession in my life is that it seems like no matter how much pain and suffering my previous drunk caused, I seem to have a mind that will always paint a picture that makes it okay for me to take another drink. My mind always seems to be able to rationalize and justify my walk back to the next drink at all costs. So therefore, because of these two components of my relationship with alcohol, number one, I cannot drink successfully. But at the very same time, because of this mental obsession, I cannot not drink successfully. I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't. It's the ultimate catch-22 we call alcoholism. Because I swear to you, if I could do either one of those two things, either drink successfully or on my own not drink successfully, I would do that. I just lied. Steve and I text and call back and forth, and one of the things he said earlier today is have a good time, but don't lie, and I'm now 6 minutes into this and I've lied. because I would not drink successfully if I could. I used to think that I wanted to drink successfully for the first 8 or 10 years of my sobriety, thinking, but I was ill-informed as to what drinking successfully is. The reason I was ill-informed as to what drinking successfully was is I had never done it. But now at 35 years of sobriety, I have read about successful drinking, and I have witnessed it many times. And I'm here to report to you what I have found out about what successful drinking apparently is. Apparently, drinking successfully entails drinking approximately 2 drinks and stopping. Let that just sort of sit there for a second. Think about it. 2 drinks and stop. I would rather all of you scream obscenities at me for the next hour rather than for me to be caught in a situation where I have 2 drinks in me and I can't get any more. I'm going to harp on that physical feature just a little bit more because the one thing, bar none, we all have in common. Because really the truth is there's a lot of things that we do not have in common because Alcoholics Anonymous is a huge, wide cross-section of society. We really are. Every single race, creed, color, religion, every single social and economic background, we're all represented in Alcoholics Anonymous. We are a huge cross-section of society. Example, right here in this room, I bet you we have a bank president, a bank teller, and a bank robber. All right here, right in the same room. Guaranteed? So our stories are different based upon what kind of family came from, what age group we're in, where we grew up, all that stuff, right? But we also drink differently than each other. We really do. If you listen closely in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, when people tell their stories, I think you'd agree, we drink differently than each other. To illustrate that, let's imagine this. Let's imagine we, right down this center aisle, we wheeled in this giant cart, and on that cart we had all the kinds of booze we all love, right? If you're a top shelf expensive drinker, okay, we got it. Remy Martin, Cavassier, we got it. If you're a bottom shelf drinker, we got that too. Mad Dog 2020. There's always a few guys in the back that start to salivate. You hear the extra clapping came from the back over there, right? Mad Dog. Right? And everything in between. And if we all took a good 4 or 5 stiff drinks, real drinks, no umbrellas in there, no mixer, a good 4 or 5 stiff drinks, we'd all be acting very, very differently. Right? Over in this corner, we'd have the good time crowd. Fun, woohoo! Party, talk, drink, talk. Add a little methamphetamine, talk a little faster, talk. But we're having a good time over there. Over in that corner, we'd have the criers. Right? Over there, we'd have the fighters. Get a little drunk, gotta fight. Over in that corner, a bunch of us would be naked. I personally would be visiting the other 3 corners trying to find a couple of friends to come over here with me. So our stories are different based upon which corner we're drinking in, right? Over in the good time corner, we get a lot of DUIs. We're always like, next bar, gotta go. After hours, we're going over to Jimmy's house. Come on, let's go, woo! Right? Out on the road, get arrested. Over in the crying corner, they don't get arrested. They don't even leave the damn house. Right? The worst they do is like call you at 3 a.m. Or God forbid these days, drunk Facebooking. So our stories are different based upon which corner we're in. But no matter which corner we're drinking in, there is one thing we would all be doing. We'd all be back at that cart for another drink. It's really important for me to understand when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous when they said, listen for the similarities rather than the differences. Because if I listen to you, how old you are, what kind of family you came from, where did you grow up, what education, what do you do for work? I don't know, maybe I'll identify, probably, very likely not. But if I listen to what happens to you when you drink, and almost more importantly, what happens to you when on your own you try not to drink. I'm you, you're me. I set this relationship up with alcohol that this is just described to you right from the get-go. When I first started drinking, I started late compared to most people in AA. I was 11. That is kind of late these days. I was in Seattle by this time. I was born in Helena, Montana at 4 years old. My father took the whole family to the island of Borneo in Southeast Asia. I came back at 9 years old. And my parents are buried in Seattle, so my family still identifies as being from Seattle. And I took a drink that I think Sheldon talked about it, that magical time between 6th and 7th grade. And by the time I'm 14, my hair is down onto my shoulders and in front of my bloodshot eyes, and my vocabulary at 14 was, whoa, wow, hey, man, hey, I call my mother man, hey, man. My parents, really good people, and they were like, what is happening to our son? But they didn't understand I was alcoholic, so they did what good people or people that love their kids would do at that time. They try to change the people, place, and things in my life, try to get me away from that group of kids I'm hanging out with. Took me out of the public school and put me into private schools. They tried all of the above, but you see, I'm alcoholic. My problems are not based upon people, place, and things. My problems are based upon my physical and mental relationship to alcohol. You see, if you change the people, place, and things in somebody's life like mine, all that happens is that I'm loaded with different people in different places, ruining different things. That's all that happens. By the time I was 17, almost 18, I barely scraped out of the public school system in Seattle after getting kicked out of the private school system. And my parents decided that Seattle was a problem. Get them out of Seattle, things would get better. They sent me 300 miles away to Washington State University. I spent 3 years at that university on my parents' money, and I got approximately 10 credits. At any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content, about a 0.25. I did nothing at that school. By the time I was 22, this little story I'm about to tell you will let you know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, my father was Swedish, my mother was Icelandic, that's why I look like a polar bear. And I don't know whether this custom I'm about to tell you about is a Scandinavian custom or whether it's a Lutheran custom, I don't know. But at Christmas time, my parents wouldn't just send out Christmas cards to their friends and relatives. My parents would send out this big, long Christmas letter that said everything the family had been doing that year. And when I was about 22, I got a hold of one of these letters that had been sent out the previous Christmas. And as I read it, it let me know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, the first paragraph talked about what my parents had been doing that year. Another impressive year, I'm sure. The next paragraph talked about what the Morris children had been doing that year, and that paragraph went something like this. Our oldest daughter, Christina, just graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, with a master's degree in human resources. She's now working for a large pharmaceutical company in the Midwest. She traveled to Europe this summer. She saw this, she saw that. Her hobbies are this, and this. She's a very happy young woman. We are very proud of her. Our oldest son, Eric, just graduated from Western Washington State University with a degree in marketing. He's now working for a large advertising firm here in downtown Seattle. He loves to golf. He loves to travel. He's engaged to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou, who works for a very small company here in Seattle named Microsoft. It was small at one time. And they love to golf together. They love to travel together. He's a very happy young man. We are very proud of him. Our youngest son, Karl, just turned 22. Long story short, it literally would take till breakfast to describe everything I'm about to tell you about what happened over the next year and a half. It really would. It would take forever to describe all of the components. And I like to just shorten it down to one sentence. And it goes like this. A really bad night happened, so I joined the United States Navy. It was a bad night. It was a bad night. What I'm about to tell you should concern you if you care anything about the security of the United States. But on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test. It's called the ASVAT test. And this test that I took qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should concern you that the United States Navy would have any type of system in place that even maybe possibly or even remotely would allow somebody like me near anything nuclear. However, they made me take another test when I showed up at that base for boot camp. And I could not pass that particular test. That test is called a urinalysis test, is what it's called. Never knew how to study for those things. Should have been kicked out. still remember like it's yesterday. I'd been in boot camp about 10, 12 days, and in came the master at arms. He had this clipboard. 6 or 7 names were on that clipboard. I knew my name was on that clipboard for going positive. I knew. Read those names off, and we were taken out of the boot camp barracks, put into this van, and we're at Great Lakes Naval Base. We were taken from the training side over to the administrative side to be discharged. And the other 5 or 6 guys were dropped off at one building, and I was taken to a completely separate building. And I was marched right into the commanding officer's office of the guy who ran the whole Great Lakes Naval Base. And I was marched into the beautiful office. Big oak desk, plush carpeting, pictures of naval vessels on the wall. Man behind that big oak desk had so much gold on his shoulders would blind you on a bad day. And I stood there, and this man looked up and he asked me my name. I gave him my name, and this would have been the early 1980s, so on this big oak desk, he had a telephone with a speakerphone attachment to it. And he pushed the button on that speakerphone, and into the speakerphone he said, "Walt." That's my father's name. I didn't mention this, but by that time in 1984, my father had been in the United States Navy as a captain and even as a Commodore, a 1-star admiral, as a reservist since World War II. This was an old Korean War buddy of my father's. The luck of it all. I remember this exact same feeling I had right there. And into this speakerphone, this gentleman said, "Walt, out of consideration for our long-term friendship, I'm supposed to kick your son out of the Navy right now, but I thought out of consideration for our friendship, I'd ask you, what do you feel we should do with your son?" Now, normally, if you met my father, there's a couple of things you would notice right away. Number one, his body language would tell you that he loved meeting you, he enjoyed life, and he had purpose. And you'd also sense that from his tone of voice that he would often use. His voice was this type of voice that you knew he just loved interacting with you. He was glad to meet you. There was also another voice that would come out of that man. It was a voice like somebody had just put their knee right below his belt buckle, out of breath, confused, and somewhat desperate. And that was the voice that I heard come through that phone that day, and I heard my father's destroyed voice on that speakerphone of, "It's just none of my concern anymore." Then click and dial tone. Remember dial tone? And that man let that dial tone go a little extra longer for the effect. For whatever reason, he decided to keep me in the Navy. They took away that 2-year nuclear school, and I was immediately sent out to the fleet. And I started to experience some of the things that a young man in the military is supposed to experience. I started to understand the camaraderie of being in the military. I started to understand the honor of serving one's country, and I started to learn a trade. All wonderful things for a young man. But I'm also alcoholic. And whenever that ship would pull into a port, I'd invariably leave that ship and take a drink. And at this point in my life, I'm 23, I'm 24, I'm 25 years old, and when I take a drink, it's turning into 2, sometimes 3, sometimes even a 4-day event. And I got to tell you that the Navy is really, really big on you showing up back at the port before the ship leaves. They're really big on that. They're big on that, kind of like AA is big on the not drinking thing. But AA is overwhelmingly forgiving about the not drinking thing. "Oh, you messed up. Come on, we love you. Come on, try again." Navy, no, not the same attitude. And I got to tell you, it's a very strange feeling coming out of one of those 3-day blackouts. And finding myself at 6 a.m. on a large pier in a foreign country going, there was a destroyer here the other day. I've been in the Navy approximately 2 years at this point. I came to in a cheap motel room in downtown San Diego. It's a Monday morning. I'd started drinking on a Thursday, and I'm late getting back to my ship again. I get into my car, and I'm racing to get back to the ship. And my car is held together by rubber bands. You know the old story. My car is dying of alcoholism right along with me, and it's held together by rubber bands, and I'm trying to get back to that ship. And one of the tools for living I have at this point is at the end of these drunks, I like to save a pint. Because when I get back to my ship, I know it's going to be a while till I get a drink. So I'm trying to get that pint in me as I'm getting back to the ship, and I'm paying more attention to getting that pint in me than where the car is going. And in front of every Navy base, there's a guard shack where a Marine stands duty. They take their job very seriously. And under normal circumstances, you're supposed to slowly and politely pull your vehicle up to that guard shack. You will show him your military ID. He will check the sticker on the front windshield of your car. If everything's in order, he'll allow you to proceed forward onto the base. And this particular morning, as I said, I'm paying more attention to getting that pint in me than where the car was going. And all of a sudden, my eyes came back into focus, and I saw the Marine had his head out of the guard shack, and I'm wondering, what is he so excited about? Till I looked down, I'm going 40 miles an hour, and I tried to swerve. The car hit this median on the right-hand side and flipped over and bang, right through that guard shack. And to this day, as I stand here, I am so grateful that United States Marines are in tip-top physical shape. I mean, this guy did a big dive out of there, did a quick somersault, he's back up, weapon drawn. And I got to tell you, I hated these kinds of mornings. I really did. Sirens are going off. People are running in various directions. They're screaming and yelling at each other. They seem to be pointing at me like this is my fault. And I'm climbing out of the car wondering what happened also. Then later that morning is stage 2 of mornings that I hated, is when I would realize that I am in a hospital bed and I am handcuffed to the hospital bed. That means I am in deep legal trouble and I am injured. And that morning the Navy superiors were reading new charges on me. This is nothing significant. This is just what happens in a guy's life like mine about every 90 days. If you're living the way I'm living, but the most significant thing that happened that morning is the Navy doctors prescribed this stuff called Antabuse for me. You know you're in AA when a big groan just sort of floats across. It's almost like the wave, right? Antabuse. And I was now under orders to show up at sick bay every single morning before quarters, and I'd have to sit in a chair and stick my tongue out. And the corpsman would put this little white pill on my tongue and make me sit there for a half an hour. And over the next 7 to 10 days, I started to experience the most cunning, baffling, and powerful side of this thing we call alcoholism, and that is I had no alcohol in my system, and I was slowly going insane. I remember vividly counting those days on that Antabuse, just... It's been 4 days, and I'm on Antabuse. Now it's been 6 days, and I'm on Antabuse. Now it's been 8 days, 6 hours, and 15 minutes, and I'm on Antabuse. And I started to look around that ship. The other men, they're talking behind my back. All 300 of them. Have you ever felt that way in AA? The only difference is that in AA, we are talking behind your back. Only with love and tolerance and tenacity, I'm sure. On the 10th day, I just snapped and I went AWOL from my ship. I locked myself in a little motel room in downtown San Diego, the Plaza Hotel. This would have been May of 1986. And the Plaza Hotel in May of 1986 cost $13 a night. I checked about 2 years ago, just before COVID, and the Plaza Hotel is still there. They've done a little upgrade, but it's now $19 a night. It's a fine establishment. And I locked myself in that little hotel room, and I had a bottle of vodka and a shot glass. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, and that bottle of vodka and shot glass was sitting on this rickety little end table. And as I stared at the bottle of vodka, I remembered that the Navy doctors had given me a very stern warning about drinking on top of Antabuse when they prescribed it for me. They had said, son, you need to understand that if you drink on top of this Antabuse, you'll get one of 2 reactions. One reaction is you will get violently ill. The other reaction is you might die. I remember looking at the bottle and I thought, well, wonder which reaction I'm going to get. I took one shot and nothing happened. Authority had lied to me again as far as I was concerned. I waited about 2 minutes just to make sure. And I took another shot. All of a sudden, I felt tingly in the face. So I looked in this cracked little mirror that was in this hotel room, and I was bright red, blotchy and purple in places. Took another shot. All of a sudden, I could feel my heart going boom, boom, boom. looked at my shirt. I was drenched in sweat, and all of a sudden, like, hyperventilating. Oh, we're doing all right so far. There is something wrong with you guys if you think this is funny. There really is. There really is. I took another shot, and up it came. My second sponsor was a man named Eddie Cochran, whose sobriety date was December 2nd, 1951, one of the pioneers of Southern California Alcoholics Anonymous. He called the next thing that happened to me projectile regurgitation. This is a new level of puking I'm unfamiliar with, right? Because we all know normal puking, right? It's one of the tools for living. We get out there. We know how to be out there in the middle of a good drunk, and you just kind of go, ha! And you just right back into the conversation. It's only they that think that puking is the end of the night, right? But here on the Antabuse, it was a different level. It was like Linda Blair's spray across the room. Right? Thank God the Plaza Hotel is the type of hotel room where the toilet is in the same room with the bed. It's a design feature, I believe, maybe to make convicts feel more at home upon release. I'm not really sure. But I found the magic of drinking on top of Antabuse, and that is if you hang in there. And that's a very important feature if you're going to drink on top of Antabuse. You cannot half measure it. In fact, if you're going to drink on top of Antabuse, you might need to reach down deep inside yourself for a level of commitment you might not even know you have. But I found that if I kept drinking and kept puking and kept drinking and kept puking for about an hour to an hour and a half, enough of the Antabuse would kick out of my system, and I would quit throwing up, and I would just be left with a red face, hyperventilating and sweating, and I'm all right with that. So I drank on top of Antabuse for the last 7 months of my drinking. The only words to describe this are desperation drinking. My second to my last drunk, I was left for dead in a motel parking lot in an area of San Diego called National City. All I remember is I was on the third floor outdoor stairs of a motel, and all of a sudden there were lots of fists flying. They apparently were not mine. Then I saw a lot of blood, saw red. Apparently that was mine. And the next thing I knew is I came to, and I'm on an operating table. And you guys know, again, alcoholic tools for living. When you come to, you can kind of look around at your surroundings. And the point is to try to figure out, was it a good night or a bad night? Right? When you come to and you're on an operating table, usually indicates a bad night. Got a little frustrated when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous over the one thing, the way you guys described coming out of blackouts. I heard this back in the 80s and 90s a lot. Don't hear it that much anymore, but I'd be in meetings and somebody say, I'm just so grateful to be sober because I now wake up instead of coming to. It used to be just so horrible. I would come to and I'd look next to me and, as if you were always the good-looking one. There's always two sides to every story. And a couple of times in my life, I'd come to and I'd look next to me, oh God, that's Chris's sister. I've loved her a long time. This is awesome. And she would come to and go, not Karl, no, and run out. And it's like, if I would have known what self-esteem was, I think it would have harmed it right there. Last night of drinking and being let out of the San Diego jail, being transferred from the civilian authorities back to military authorities. I'm in handcuffs, being transferred from this group of officials to this group, and handcuffs are extra tight that morning. Neck muscles not working well, and they tried to bring me back to my ship that morning. And that morning, the officer deck put his arm up as we approached. Said, "Wrong answer. Orders have already been processed on this loser. The orders are 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, or treatment." And when he said that or treatment thing, I kind of went, Now, it wasn't because I thought treatment was a good idea. Didn't even really know what that was. I didn't even know what the world of sobriety or recovery, or certainly did not know what Alcoholics Anonymous was. I'd heard of it, but, I guess the way you hear of somebody going to treatment or that they're in AA, you're at the bar or the crack house, and you go, "Where's Joe?" "He went to treatment." I never did follow-up questions. Hey, what does that entail? What exactly does that mean? Let's have a conversation about that. And what is he going to do after that? Right? You just kind of, poor Joe. Right? The reason it piqued my interest was because that treatment thing sounded like something that might help me with the inevitable charges that I knew were once again coming my way. I now know that it wouldn't have mattered what I was thinking or feeling that particular morning because I was in handcuffs. And I don't know about your experience in handcuffs, but my experience was always the same. Whoever had me in handcuffs, never once did they ever turn to me and say, "So what's your opinion on what's going to happen next?" Right? When you're in handcuffs, you go where they say. And I was taken up to a military treatment center, and when the doors were locked behind me, that's when they took the handcuffs off me. There's no better description of who Karl Morris is without Alcoholics Anonymous than that. The society in which I'm supposed to be living in and contributing to, and the country I'm supposed to be serving is only willing to take the handcuffs off me when the doors are locked behind me. That's who I am without you. So I do this 45 days in this military treatment center, and first couple of days they're doing medical checkups on us. They have us in a group therapy session, and they would have us in group therapy, and then they take us out one guy at a time. They go in, maybe their file showed up, and they do a medical checkup on them, and that's how they operate the first couple of days. And this facilitator was trying to get us to talk, and none of us are willing to talk. We're arms folded, looking down the ground. And this facilitator, I think he was new, started to get a little upset and agitated as he's trying to get us to talk. And somewhere around the third day, this fellow named Paco from some other base raised his hand and says, I'd like to say something. This facilitator got really excited. Yes, Paco, what would you like to say? And Paco said, I hear that I'm supposed to be rigorously honest if I'm going to do this staying sober thing. And I want you guys to know that Paco's not my real name. Paco's just a name I've used ever since I've been a young teenager when everything looked like trouble. And when I got here the other day, this looked like trouble. But my file's going to be here any day, and you'll find out my real name's Randy, and I'd like to be upfront and honest with you. So will you guys call me Randy from now on? And we all kind of go, okay, nice to meet you, Randy. But this facilitator got really excited and said, oh my God, this is the first breakthrough of any honesty of any of you SOBs. Later that afternoon, Randy was paraded in front of us. They put us in a room. They paraded Randy right in front of us. They slapped a gold name tag on it. It said Randy, and that we were all informed that whenever staff was not around, Randy's now in charge as a reward for being honest. Randy loved his new job, and we all hated Randy. On the seventh day, they took us all to our first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. At least it was my first meeting. All I know is we've been in this place for 7 days, and they said over the 1MC, it's like that's the intercom system through the barracks. Parking lot, 6 p.m., civilian clothes. And 5 white vans pull up, and they put 6 or 7 of us into each van, and each van took off to a different meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we would arrive at, these big Southern California meetings, and we would sit in the back, and we would watch Alcoholics Anonymous. I did not know there was a difference between watching Alcoholics Anonymous and actually being in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous or doing Alcoholics Anonymous. But I got to tell you, I'm so grateful that Alcoholics Anonymous allows outside agencies to send people to watch Alcoholics Anonymous. Because what happened with me and sitting in the backs of those rooms listening to you guys, there's a couple of things that happened. See, I had been put in front of other people that wanted to help me before. I had been put in front of well-meaning, highly educated people. My parents sent me to the university I flunked out of sent me to a psychiatrist. My parents sent me to psychologists and psychiatrists. Navy now, I had a weekly appointment with a psychiatrist and a chaplain. And all these well-meaning, highly educated people all wanted to help me, but each time I would be able to discredit that interaction because I would think, well, the only reason you're in this room is because I'm here. If I wasn't here, you wouldn't be here, and somebody's paying you to be there. So if I get up and walk out of this room, this conversation's over, isn't it? Right? And I got to tell you that the first thing I noticed about Alcoholics Anonymous is that I noticed you guys would be here whether I was here or not. As I saw you guys get up and tell your stories to the podium, I realized I could get up and walk out, and this whole thing would be continuing anyway. Lent a lot of credibility to what you were doing. The other thing that I noticed is all these well-meaning, highly educated people always wanted to talk to me about me. They would ask questions like, what's the matter with you? Let's discuss, why is it that you do these things? And what is it that happened earlier in life that causes you to do these things? Let's talk about that, Karl. They wanted to talk to me about me, and it seemed like you guys did not want to talk to me about me. You guys seem to just want to talk about yourselves. Just on and on and on about yourselves, like I'm doing right now. You just go on. But something happened as I listened to you talk about yourself that I connected with another human being like I never had. In the way you described your alcoholism, your relationship to alcohol, the way you felt about the world. See, also with those well-meaning people that were trying to help me throughout my life, If I would have had the vocabulary that you guys have given me, if I would have had the vocabulary back then, I would have said, I know, you're really shocked that I'm willing to pay this price for a drink. I get it. I see you're shocked. You're shocked that I still had the charcoal on my mouth from getting my stomach pumped, and I have a drink in my hand. I see that you are shocked. I get it. But I would have followed up with this. However, if you knew how I felt when I wasn't drinking, you wouldn't be asking me why I drink. See, there's only one thing worse than the price I'm paying for my drinking, and that's the way that I feel when I'm not drinking. And I don't know how to tell you that, let alone myself. 45 days and let us all out of that military treatment center, and it was going to be let out on a Friday, and on the Wednesday before that Friday, they gathered all 35ers. There's 35ers. They're going to get out after that 45 days. They put us in this room, and we're sitting in the room. It's a group kind of like this square of people right here. And a side door opens up, and the biggest, meanest counselor in the Navy Treatment Center walks in. He's a Marine. And that day he is in his full dress uniform. And I got to tell you, a Marine in his full dress uniform, and a Marine that's been in the service for quite some time, is a very impressive sight. And that door opened up. There he stood in his full dress uniform, and you could hear his shoes come across the floor. And we just all went, and it just went dead silent in that room. And he came up to a podium much like this, and he leaned across it, and he stared at us. He panned the room and stared at us. Seemed like forever. It's probably just 60 seconds. And then he finally spoke. He said, you 35 have been through one of the finest treatment centers in the world for alcoholism and drug addiction. This treatment center has been here for many years, and our statistics over the years have shown us that out of you 35, only one of you will stay continuously sober from this day forward. Many of you will die, go insane, wind up in prison. Nice little exit pep talk, don't you think? And he said, many of you will relapse once, twice, maybe 20 times, and then make it back into long-term sobriety. But according to this treatment center statistics, only one of you will stay continuously sober from this day forward. Man, if you thought it was quiet before he said that, you could hear a pin drop now. The only thing you could hear was me going, shit. Because I knew if only one of us was going to make it, it was not going to be me. We all knew who it was going to be. It's going to be Randy over here. He's like the poster boy of the treatment center by now. You think he turned in a term paper on acceptance, right? So on this Friday afternoon, people were taken back to their ships, base, and commands in various different ways. And a small group of us were informed that since we had been arrested in vehicles the night before, that our vehicles had been placed in an impound lot, and that if we go stand on the front doorsteps of the treatment center, our vehicles would be brought out of the impound lot one at a time. I was one of those guys, so I'm standing with 3 or 4 other guys. We're kind of looking at each other. Sea bags at our feet. You feel treated? I don't know. What is that supposed to feel like? I don't know. And all of a sudden, one of the guys I'm standing with points at the parking lot. There's a car coming, and he says, "Is that Randy in that car?" I go, "Yeah. Must have gotten out early, maybe for turning in that gold name tag or something." Got a little closer, and by God, he's drinking. One guy says, "He's drinking already." He rolls right up. He's got a bottle in his hand, and he rolls down the window, goes, "Ha ha ha!" Shoots it down, throws the empty right at our feet. Crash! We look up. He gives us all the finger, and he drives right off. I guess his name was Paco again. I don't know. I remember when my car arrived. I remember going out the gates of that military base, and it's a figure of speech right now, but which way is my life going to go? Am I turning right to those meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous they took us to, or am I turning left to the bars? Which way is my life going to go? And I remembered where this one meeting hall was, the North Shore Alano Club in Pacific Beach. And it was late in the afternoon, and I went to the 6 o'clock gong show meeting in Pacific Beach. Big, energetic, fun meeting. The reason I remembered where this particular AA clubhouse was is that I had to push start my car. Had a hole in the floorboard, 68 Volkswagen, and one of the tools for living when you are push starting a car is you always look for places to park that are on a slight incline, right? You got the little piece of wood that you wedge there, so you can pull the wedge and it starts rolling on itself, so it's easy kickstart, right? And that meeting hall was on a little bit of an incline. And so I went to that 6 o'clock gong show meeting. I'm sitting in the back of Back of the room, I don't know anybody, and I'm sure there were many people that night operating on their primary purpose. This fellow was looking around the backs of the room that particular Friday night, and he zeroed in on me, and I was kind of sitting there, and he just came right at me, and he said, "I've never seen you before. What are you doing?" I didn't think quick enough to lie to him, because I swear if I would have thought for one more second, I would have lied to him. And I accidentally told him the truth. I said, "I don't know. I just got out of a Navy treatment center about an hour ago. I don't know what I'm doing." This guy's eyes went bing! Big smile went across his face. He looked like he had just hit the jackpot in Las Vegas. Right? See, I didn't know that I had just established myself as the holy grail of Alcoholics Anonymous. The newcomer who accidentally admits he does not know what he's doing. Right? This guy's all excited. And he's like fighting his friends. "No, I got this guy. He is mine. He's mine. Mine. There was something else going on in that guy's life that particular Friday night that made him especially glad to meet me. This guy's girlfriend had left him the night before for one of his friends in his home group. So he was, I know. Right? So he was wondering what he was going to do with his weekend, homicide, suicide, get loaded or grab this newcomer. He's like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this guy was insane over this woman, flat out insane. In between this barrage of meetings he dragged me to, he would throw me in the passenger side of his car, he'd start driving, and he'd start yelling. He wouldn't even look at the road. It's like he had this AA radar car that just made it to the next meeting, I guess. And he'd be yelling at me, "You gotta go to meetings, you gotta read the book, you gotta get a sponsor." Damn her! Gotta go to meetings, gotta read the book. I was like, Jesus. I didn't know it, but I was getting a very early introduction to your typical AA relationship breakup is what I was getting. But I'm so very glad that guy, that night in his pain, was a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous who had done the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, who had taken the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and therefore he understood that the solution to his pain was out of self, out of self, out of self. Taking the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous does not mean that we are not going to have ugly and difficult breakups. It does not mean we're not going to have difficult work situations and family situations and heartbreak in life. But taking the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous allows us to get through it and focus our attention on other people rather than trying to fix our stuff, and remember that God's in charge. And I just was a prop in that guy's weekend. That's all I was. I was just a prop in his weekend so he didn't do something stupid. By going to so many meetings in the same area of town, I learned something really valuable about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, especially when we're new. See, by him taking me to so many meetings in the same area of town, I saw other people that were at multiple meetings on that weekend. Now, I didn't see anybody else doing 18 meetings, just me and that guy. But I saw other people that were at 2 or 3 meetings over that weekend. And what I learned about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, especially when we're new, I'm going to correlate it to a football game. Now, a football team is out there on the field for one reason, and one reason only, to win the game. And how do they win that game? They will huddle up, they will make a plan, and they will do one play. Then they will huddle up again, they'll make another plan, and they will do one play. That's exactly what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the game around here is one day without a drink. And how do we do that one day? We run in here and we huddle up. And we'll remember, we're bodily, mentally different from our fellows. Right! And we go out there and we try a little of this, and we try a little of that. After that weekend, I got back to my ship, and one other sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous was waiting for me. His name was Bob W. He was 23 years old, and he had 16 months of sobriety. We always teased him. "Oh, you're the hybrid of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill W. and Dr. Bob, you are Bob W., aren't you?" And he loved that. He just loved that. But he was the one other sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had a sponsor that had been egging him on to find somebody to work with, and here I come. Right? I'm like gold being delivered to him on a silver platter. I would have to jump overboard to get away from this guy. And my first 2 years of sobriety were spent on USS Cushing, Spruance-class destroyer, DD 985, traveling the world. And whenever we pull into a port, Bob and I would come and find you. And there were no meeting apps. I know, I'm going to sound like your grandfather. "I walked to school in 8 feet of snow." There were no meeting apps. We had to get off that ship and make a phone call, put quarters or a calling card into a payphone, and we call. Maybe we get a voicemail, maybe answer machine, not a voicemail. Maybe we get a live person, we get an address, we go find you. But we always, if we did the work, we would find you guys. And you guys always were there. And when the ship was out at sea, my first sponsor, Bob's sponsor, said we had to read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous back and forth. And so every night at 6:30 in engine room number 2 down at the battery shop, he and I would read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous every night. And it was, in my mind's eye, when I look back at those 2 years and those two men out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, those two young kids, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous in its purest form, the blind leading the blind. Neither one of us knew what the hell we were doing, but we had a willingness to stay sober. We had a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we tried. And I got to tell you, the thing that's supposed to happen, this fundamental rearrangement at the level of our souls, happened. Bob died in 2011 of cancer, and he was still 16 months ahead of me. And at his funeral, I've had so many amazing experiences, but one of them was at his funeral. 5 or 6 young men walked up to me with a big book. They said, Bob made us promise that at the funeral we would give this to you. And I go, what is it? They said, Bob said if you opened it up, you would know. And I had to take the rubber band off and the string that was tied because it was falling apart. And I opened it up, and my God, it's the book from the ship. It had both our sobriety dates in it. Right? And I also, during these 2 years, I found the real magic of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is one alcoholic can affect another alcoholic like no one else can. It really is. It's the fundamental, basic tenet of Alcoholics Anonymous. One alcoholic can affect another. No one else can help us except us. And how I learned that is whenever the ship would pull into a port, Bob and I, like I said, would go to meetings, but sometimes we would split a hotel room to get off the ship. Right? We happened to be in Victoria, British Columbia at this time. We got off the ship. We rented a hotel room. We went to the AA meeting. After the meeting, Bob said, hey, Karl, I'm tired. I know you want to stay out later. I'm going to go back. I'm not feeling well. So he went back early. I stayed out with the AAers. Maybe went to another meeting, went out to coffee, whatever it is I did. A couple hours later, I come back to the hotel room, and apparently Bob, on his way back to the hotel room, had found another guy from our ship named Blair. And Blair was wasted. I mean, Blair had obviously gotten off the ship earlier than us. He'd been drinking for a couple of days. He is, vomit down the front, been laying in the street, that kind of drunk. Like, oh, right? And Bob has him on my bed. Bob has him propped up against the headboard with like an end table and a chair and a pillow. Blair sitting there. And Bob is there reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to him. We are more than 100 men and women who are... And I look at this snare and I think this is ridiculous. Blair doesn't even know where he's at. Bob, what are you doing? But I threw my 10 cents in, and then we carried Blair back to the ship to make sure he's safe and get him back in his rack. And that's the last we hear of Blair for weeks. He's like trying to avoid us, I guess. Weeks and weeks later, we are in port in San Diego. It's 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'm in my rack. I'm on duty on the ship. And, Karl, wake up! And I pull the curtain back, and there's Bob. He goes, get up! Blair's on the Coronado Bridge. We got to go get him! If you don't know San Diego very well, the Coronado Bridge connects the island of Coronado with downtown San Diego. It's an extremely popular suicide spot. Such a popular suicide spot that back in the 80s and 90s, before cell phones, they had about every 100 yards, they had a suicide hotline phone in case you climbed up there and then you changed your mind, right? They wanted to have a phone handy. And this is what Blair had done. He'd gone up there to commit suicide, to jump off, and then he picked up the suicide hotline phone. And this is what he was apparently saying to the well-meaning, highly educated suicide hotline counselor. Blair was apparently saying, I will only talk to Bob W. Suicide hotline counselor says, who's Bob W? Blair said, it's anonymous. So she went and got her boss, and they started to do the good cop, bad cop, firing questions at him, confuse him, and they found out he was from the Navy and what ship he's from. So they just took a stab in the dark, called down to the quarterdeck of our ship at 3 a.m. in the morning. And they said, is by chance there a Bob W. on that ship? And my first sponsor, Bob, he would guard your anonymity at the level of that ship, but he never guarded his own so he could be of service at any time. So the guy who answered the phone said, yeah, Mr. 12 Steps, we know all about him. So you go down and get Bob. Bob comes and gets me. We get into Bob's car. And we're driving down to the Coronado Bridge, and Bob looks over and says, Karl, get the big book out of the glove box. Bone up on working with others. Like, says, I'll forget it. We're going to wing it tonight. We get down to this staging area that they have at the base of the Coronado Bridge, and Bob and I started approaching, and see, the fire department is there, the police department is there. the on-duty, the paramedics are there, the on-duty psychologist is there, and these men, that seems to be the fireman who seems to be in charge, turns to us as Bob and I are walking up, and he says, "Is one of you Bob W.?" Bob goes, yeah, that's me. And he goes, "I don't know what you're going to do. We've been talking for an hour and a half, and he ain't budging. But here, go ahead." Hands him this little speakerphone contraption. And Bob says, "Blair." Can hear on the other end, "Bob, is that you?" Bob says, "Yes, Blair, it's me, and I'll get the hell down from that bridge." Here. Okay. One alcoholic can affect another alcoholic like no one else can. Don't forget that. Now, I've been able to amend that story a little bit lately because of this amazing thing called Zoom that saved all of our ass for 18 months. Because of Zoom, my home group now has 2 big giant TV screens in the clubhouse room, and we have a Sunday night speaker meeting, and around Christmas they don't want to bother anybody to leave their family, so they asked me to talk right around Christmas, at Sunday lands near Christmas, and I was up telling my story, and because of Zoom, I had the privilege of telling that story at my home group and then saying, "I'd like you all to meet somebody," and on the screen, boom, "My name's Blair, I'm an alcoholic." It was yeah. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. 2 years sober, I got an honorable discharge out of the Navy. That is the result of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and apparently merciful God, and a Navy clerk that lost half my file. That's how that happened. One of the amends I was unable to make while I was still in the Navy was that my parents had paid for that bachelor's degree. Remember, they'd been sending checks to the State University and University of Washington and Seattle U over a 3-year period, and I had nothing. So Bob, my first sponsor, did not know what to do about that, but, the grand sponsor, it's never good news when the grand sponsor gets involved in your business. My grand sponsor's in the room right now, Tim, right? It's never good when they get involved in your business. And I was given this set of direction. I either had to pay my parents back every single nickel they had wasted on that, or I had to go get what they paid for in the first place. So I'm still push-starting that same car that I got sober with 2 years later because of the amends and having to pay back my Navy paycheck. I barely saw any of it. And I had everything I owned, and I'm puttering on up to the LA freeways. I'd found this university near this town called Covina. And my intention was I was just going to go get this degree in telecommunications management and computer science, and I'd be heading back to Seattle to take advantage of the big tech world that I had all the family contacts with, and I've never left Covina. It's now 33 years later. I went and got that bachelor's degree, and my life took a turn. Right? I remember puttering on up to Covina, everything I own in that car, and I started to think, I need a life. I've heard people in AA talk about having a life. I need one of those. And I'm going to be going to school, I'm going to be working, and I need to get a life. And I decided I'd look to see where the meeting hall was, that I could stop by when I got a chance while I was getting a life. And I went to this noon meeting, and the man making coffee at that noon meeting zeroed in on me the same way that guy did when I was fresh out of the treatment center. And as he approached me, I saw this medallion. Anybody remember back in the 70s and 80s, the old-timers wore these big circle and triangle medallions with their sobriety date on it? They did in Southern California. It said 1951. It's like, whoa, 10 years sober when I was born, for God's sake. And he did not aggressively approach me. Eddie Cochran was a very gentle man. And he said, "Son, it's very nice to meet you. I don't think I've met you before. What you doing?" This time I had a much better answer. I said, "Sir, it's very nice to see your meeting hall here. I'm 2 years sober. I'm fresh out of the United States Navy. I'm going to a local university, and you won't see me very often. I'm going to be taking a full load, and I've got to work, and I'll stop by when I get a chance." And Eddie had this little laugh that it was the first time I was to hear that of many other times. When I would call him, he always... And he said, "Oh, son, school and work are wonderful things to do." "Great, fantastic idea, but son, that's what we do in between meetings." And what he's really given me is one of the secrets of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is I need to live in Alcoholics Anonymous and visit the world. he was giving me that gentle warning, please, son, don't try to hash it out there in the real world and visit us when convenient. And there was another way of saying something that I heard from my sponsor. His name is Bob Bazant. His son, Peter, is a good friend of mine. And the other night he said something that's in the same vein. He said at some point an old-timer told him he needed to quit being a consumer of Alcoholics Anonymous and become a producer of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's the same thing that he was saying to me that day. And first thing he told me to do is to put new guys in my car. And I said, I have to push start the thing. I have a hole in the floorboard. And he said, put new guys in your car, life will get better. I didn't see how that would possibly be, but the first night I did it, I realized this man had not lied to me. My life got better the very first night I put new guys in my car. They could push start my car. He didn't say how much better, he just said better. I'm going to tell this story. Remember at the beginning I really emphasized the allergy, body, obsession, mind. I've got about 5 minutes left. Is that about right, Lee? Yeah. Lee's not over. Actually, I don't have time to tell that story. All right. This might be a bad story. You never know. All right. I talked about the physical allergy and the mental obsession, but you know what? I've come to believe, and this happened when I was 13 years sober, that I have a very profound spiritual relationship with alcohol that is very different than other people. And how I came to realize this thing that makes me, this thing that's been trying to communicate with you for the last hour or so, the thing that poets and musicians and theologians and philosophers have all talked about, the human spirit. That thing seems to have a different relationship to alcohol than other people. In the same way that our bodies respond differently and our mind responds differently, my spirit responds differently too. And the way that I found this out was at 13 years sober, my mother called me up and said, Karl, your brother and his wife, Mary Lou, they're spending the summer in the south of France. And they said they have this big house, and there's a whole wing of it that they said we could go stay in as long as we want. And if you're wondering where people get that kind of money, remember Microsoft, remember that? No resentment from me on that type of thing. And I go, that sounds like a blast, Mom. Let's go. She goes, fantastic. She said, well, since you were making that trip, let's stop in Iceland and we'll go see the family farm and this museum dedicated to your great aunt. And I go, this is sounding even better. Let's go. And so we went to Iceland, spent about 10 days there, and I had such a phenomenal time there. I've actually been back to Iceland like 7 times since the year 2000, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the story happens in the south of France. And we'd been there about 3 nights. My brother says, Karl, since you don't drink, you'll be driving, and we're all going to go out for a 13-course French meal. Mary Lou and I have been reading about this place about 5 kilometers down the way, and we really want to go. And I said, okay. You're paying? You go, yeah, I'm paying. I go, I'm driving. Okay. And they had the nannies watch the kids, and my mom and my brother and his wife, we go about 5 kilometers down the road, and indeed we pull up to this amazing castle in the French countryside. And the whole courtyard and the first level is all this amazing restaurant, just an amazing restaurant. We embark on a 13-course French meal. I'd never had a 13-course French meal before, not had one since. And if you've never had a 13-course French meal, what they do is they bring you a tiny little bit of food 13 times. That's what they do. They bring you a tiny little bit of food 13 times. And with each one of these tiny little bits of food, they bring you a ridiculously small little glass of wine. And the waiter or the maitre d' will tell a story about why that wine was paired with that food. Then they will tell you a story about what vineyard that wine came from, and the family, and what region that vineyard is in, and historically what family has owned that region. All very interesting, and my brother and his wife recognized a good drinking opportunity, and they're laughing and trying this and trying that, said, hey, maybe we ought to try pairing it with this food and see how that is. Hey, where was that vineyard? Maybe we ought to go do a wine tasting next week. And they're having a good time. Now I'm already 13 years sober, so I am trying all the Diet Cokes of the region. I kept on asking the waiter to tell a story about that. He seemed to get embarrassed for me. But my mother, she's not a non-drinker, but she's like a professional avoid drinking person. She accepts your offer, and she'll barely put it to her lips, and then she'll just set it down and continue on. And I've seen this. I've witnessed this a lot. Since when my father passed away in 96, my mom got a lot of Lifetime Achievement Awards for the stuff she did in her life when she was in her 80s and stuff. And so I would fly up to Seattle and escort her as her partner to these things. And I'd see her do that. She'd get offered. She wouldn't say no. She would just accept it, kind of just barely take a sip and set it down. But that's awkward when all these little glasses are piling up. So she tells the waiter, take those away and don't bring any more for me. And I said, Mom, come on, I'm driving. Have a little more, for God's sake. And she goes, no, I don't like the way it makes me feel. I've heard her say it before. And I don't know why I decided to ask the $1 million question on this particular night, but I decided to ask the $1 million question. I said, Mom, tell me, how does it make you feel? And what she said literally floored me. She said, well, Karl, I'm here having a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I'm sitting here with 3 of the people I love the most. And I'm here looking at the incredible colors of the French countryside at sunset. And those colors I can barely put into words and just, And Karl, the string quartet, the music is rattling my bones and bringing back so many valuable memories of my life. And I'm having a great conversation with the people I love. And I don't want to give that up because, Karl, if I were to drink a little bit too much alcohol, the colors would start to get dull and blurry. The music would start to sound shallow and off in the distance. And I'd have a really hard time keeping this conversation going with you. Do you get that? That's fundamentally the opposite relationship to alcohol than I have. Because what she's saying is of and by herself, she can see the colors of life. She can hear the music. And she can connect with God's other kids. She adds a little bit too much alcohol and it all gets dull, blurry, and sloppy. You see, me, of and by myself, I cannot see the colors. I cannot hear the music. And you are goddamn boring. You really are. You give me 4 or 5 drinks and oh my God, do you see those colors? The tapestry of God's handiwork is beyond comprehension. Do you hear that music? I will tell you where that cello was made. I can make up the name of a German village on the spot, whether I know or not. And you become very interesting, but not as interesting as me. And I had this overwhelming feeling of, that's what Alcoholics Anonymous did. It awakened my soul to life without a drink. And I didn't even know it was happening. But then I turned to my brother and go, alcohol is really important to you guys. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, is that what alcohol does to you too? And he goes, yeah. We like it dull and blurry. We like to escape sometimes. And I go, oh, you're escaping. I'm trying to join. That's the type of alcoholic I am. I'm trying to come into life with alcohol. And what Alcoholics Anonymous does slowly, and you've heard it 1,000 times, is that it awakens us to each other and to life and this amazing thing called this world around us and this thing we all seek called God without a drink. That's the point of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the point of us interacting. One last little story and then I'm going to sit down. Kind of sums it up. 1998, I was asked to go and do exactly what I'm doing here. And before everybody had cell phones. And everybody had a pager. Remember pagers? They worked most of the area of the country, but there were these big swatches of the country where it didn't work. And before I left, I was supposed to go to Nogales, Arizona. And before I left, I called my mother and I said, Mom, if you try to page me this weekend and I don't answer, I don't want you to worry. I'm going to Nogales, Arizona for the weekend, and please don't worry. And she goes, oh, you need to get a hold of Don and Leona. They'd love to hear from you. And I go, can you remind me who that is? And she says, oh, Don and Leona. Don was the best man at your father's in my wedding. They've been lifelong. Oh, that's right, Karl. You haven't seen him since you were 9 years old. And I go, oh, yes. Of course, I'll give him a call. So I call up Don before I leave. I go, Don, this is Karl Morris. Oh, Karl, good to hear from you. And I go, I'm going to be down in Nogales, Arizona this weekend, and maybe we get together for some coffee or something. He goes, oh, I hear you love to golf. I love to golf. Bring your golf clubs. We'll go golfing. And I go, how do you know that? I haven't seen. That's weird. I'm obsessed with golf. I love to golf. And I brought my clubs, and on Saturday morning I left the conference. I went up 20 miles up to Green Valley, just south of Tucson, and I met him at his golf course. We started to walk along and play golf, and he started to ask me very specific, pertinent questions about my life. It's like he knew what school I had graduated from. He knew what my degree was in, what companies I'd been with, the recovery house. It is everything that I've done in my life by 1998, and I was getting more confused because his questions were so based on fact. And I tried to squeeze in a couple of questions as to what he retired from, and I got confused. By the fourth hole, I go, Don, I'm really confused. I haven't seen you since I was 9 years old. How on earth do you know all this about my life? He said, oh, that's easy, Karl. 2 reasons. First reason, before your father passed away in 1996, you couldn't shut him up. It was kind of irritating sometimes. He would go on and on and on about you. Now, that wasn't new. That my father and I became the best of friends because you guys taught me to quit trying to be understood and to understand. Learn more about him than trying to make him understand who you are. That completely shifted my relationship with my father. We became the best of friends before he passed away. But it was nice to hear from an old friend, right? Nice to hear. But the second thing he said, I couldn't even swing a golf club anymore. He said, besides, every Christmas I get the letter. I'm like, oh, yes! Yes, yes, yes! If there is nothing else that this does, at least, Alcoholics Anonymous got me on that Christmas letter. Right? Man. And I'll end with this. If nobody's told you that they love you today, hang out a little longer. It's only 3 p.m. All right, thanks.